Hidden Power was first introduced in Generation 2 and was influential in the metagame from the very start. It was a little less influential in the in-game simply because unless you were using it on Unown, you had to get the Hidden Power TM, and then once you used the Hidden Power TM, you would have to go find another one, and all the TM moves are generally more limited. But at least in competitive, Hidden Power since Generation 2 has been very useful. However, in Generation 8 in Sword and Shield, Hidden Power was removed from the game along with a bunch of other moves, and most of those other moves didn't matter so much, but Hidden Power is definitely one of the moves that was most sorely missed, because Hidden Power is used on a wide variety of Pokemon in order to let them do their jobs properly. And by removing Hidden Power, they all of a sudden were left scrambling trying to find new ways to hit Pokemon. Now, some of those mons Game Freak did take care of and granted them new coverage options which they needed and were able to use, and in many of those instances, the coverage that they received was actually superior to Hidden Power, and so they weren't complaining at all. For instance, Raikou got Scald, which, although that isn't Hidden Power Ice, Hidden Power Water is often just as good as Hidden Power Ice, and Scald has a chance to burn and is more powerful, so Raikou can't complain. Similarly, some Fairy types and some Psychic types got Mystical Fire, including the Lottie twins and Sylveon, so they didn't necessarily miss Hidden Power Fire being removed from the game either. However, Hidden Power has often been a strategy that's been useful, especially in more limited metagames. And we'll talk more about BDSP, which is definitely a limited metagame. We'll talk about that later, but one limited metagame that I do want to talk about is draft format. In draft format, you and your opponent, and other opponents as well, will all draft Pokemon to use against each other. So going into a battle, you know exactly which Pokemon your opponent has access to, and you can play around that accordingly. So for example, if my opponent has a Tapu Bulu, I might put Hidden Power Poison on one of my Pokemon. Or if I know that my opponent has Diancie, then I might use Hidden Power Steel. And while those Hidden Powers aren't usually used in competitive play on general teams, although sometimes they are, they tend to crop up more often in draft format. But when Hidden Power was removed from the game, you no longer had that option, and so your tools to deal with certain Pokemon were more limited. However, those Pokemon maybe were okay with that because now they are more protected, and that actually acts as an indirect buff for a lot of them. In any case, Hidden Power has a long storied history. One thing we do need to understand before we get too much into our conversation is how Hidden Power has changed over the generations. Originally, Hidden Power used to have a base power of 70, except that isn't exactly accurate. Hidden Power actually had a variable base power dependent upon your IVs or individual values, or in Gen 2 it was actually DVs or whatever it was, but it's basically the same as IVs. And depending on the individual stats that your Pokemon has at birth or whenever you catch it, that will determine the Hidden Power type as well as how powerful it is. And so in order to get a base power of 70, you actually had to pull up a calculator like the one they have on Sidepokes to figure out, what IVs do I need to have a specific Hidden Power with a specific strength. And of course, you're usually aiming for a base power of 70 if you can manage it. So that's really annoying when you're breeding. In Generation 6, they fixed that slightly because in Generation 6, they actually made Hidden Power base 60 power across all the board. So now, although you still have to worry about your IVs when it comes to choosing a type for your Hidden Power to be, you no longer have to worry about getting it up to max power. Any of the IVs combinations will work in order to get up to the max power of 60, because now Hidden Power is just always base power of 60, which is nice. Another thing to understand about Hidden Power is that in Generations 2 and 3, Hidden Power was, of course, changing its type according to your IVs, but in Generation 2, the physical special split did not exist yet, meaning that types like Bug or Rock or Steel, which were determined to be physical types, would always mean that any move of that type would be physical, so that included Hidden Power. The Hidden Power was often used on physical attackers back in Generations 2 and 3 to use as physical moves. So Hidden Power wasn't necessarily a physical or a special move back in Generations 2 and 3, but in Generation 4, when the physical special split happened and you were able to have Waterfall be a physical move and Surf be a special move, then Hidden Power became purely a special move and was generally relegated to the realm of special attackers. So when we get to Generation 8, we have to ask, why did Game Freak remove Hidden Power? And because we don't work for Game Freak, we can't answer that. We often wonder why Game Freak does things, and we don't, unfortunately, have answers to most of those, so we have to guess, we have to speculate. And we can make some guesses. One guess is that Game Freak was trying to make the game easier to for competitive players. If I want to play competitively, I may be required to run Hidden Power on a Pokemon. That would require me to breed for specific IVs on a Pokemon. That actually is rather annoying. And so it might be better to just say, hey, if we get rid of Hidden Power, then Pokemon can just have 31 IVs across the board, and people won't have to worry about that anymore, meaning that the barrier to entry for people to play in competitive battles becomes lower as a result. And that's nice. We can see that in Gen 7 even, they were trying to make Hidden Power, or I guess maybe they were just trying to make competitive easier to get into by introducing the mints, right? The mints meant that all of your stats would automatically get buffed up to the max they could possibly be. That actually helped Hidden Power slightly, because a lot of times you needed to have a speed stat that was not maximum for your Pokemon in order to get a Hidden Power that you wanted. And with the mints now, you could have whatever Hidden Power you wanted, but you could mint it up and then have a maxed out Pokemon. And so while that made Hidden Power stronger, that actually makes the barrier to entry a little bit harder in terms of Hidden Power, because I not only have to now breed for Hidden Power, but then I have to acquire mint, which isn't always easy to get in these games, depending on which game it is, and the methods they give you for acquiring them. And then I have to mint up that, or not mint, bottle cap that stat. So that's one reason potentially that they may have removed Hidden Power. They just wanted to make it easy for people to breed their Pokemon instead of having to worry about getting an attack and a speed and a special attack stat of 30 or a particular Hidden Power. I'm just going to say no more Hidden Powers, and now you don't have to worry about it. The second reason is that we don't know, Game Freak didn't know what to do with Hidden Power when it comes to Dynamax. I don't necessarily think this is it for a couple of reasons. While moves like Pursuit probably were removed because they interfered with Dynamax, on the other hand, Hidden Power probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Weather Ball, they don't seem to have a problem with that and how it's coded in. They didn't have a problem with Hidden Power in Generation 7 with Z moves. So I really don't see that as being an issue. The other reason why I don't think this would have been the problem is that when Game Freak had Ilka make the BDSP remakes, right, the Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl remakes, they had the opportunity to put Hidden Power back in the game. And Hidden Power technically was back in the game, but it could only be learned by Unown. So it wasn't really back in the game at all now, was it? And if they had really been struggling with it only for Dynamax, BDSP would have had it. Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl were supposed to be faithful remakes, and that was an excuse that was trotted out time and again for why they didn't bring back certain features from Platinum, why they didn't upgrade the remakes to actually be better because Pearl and Diamond people actually had quite a few problems with, and it wasn't until Platinum that it got fixed. And people really like Platinum, but Diamond and Pearl not so much. So when they went back to make Diamond and Pearl again and do the remakes, people said, hey, why don't we put this in, why don't we put that in? And Ilka said, hey, we're trying to make a faithful remake. But what they really meant is we don't want to put in that much effort, and we're going to just do the bare minimum, unfortunately. But they could have put in Hidden Power, because that would have been faithful. Hidden Power existed in Gen 4 and was used on all sorts of Pokemon all the time. But they decided not to. So there must be an actual reason that Game Freak doesn't want Hidden Power in the games. Otherwise, it would have been in BDSP, in my opinion. Now, there's another reason why I think Game Freak wants it gone, besides making it easier for competitive. And it actually has to do with competitive again. Now, as an example of what they don't want to see, in 2016, in VGC, they allowed the legendaries to be used in competitive for the official Pokemon World Championship. This isn't Smogon, this is the thing the Pokemon thinks competitive should look like, and it's their game that they're hosting, right? So they're going to keep their eyes on that, make sure it looks like the way they want it to look like. If Smogon isn't being ran the way the Game Freak wants, or the Pokemon Company, or whoever, well, that's fine, because that's just made up. It doesn't matter. But if VGC is doing stuff that they don't like, now we're going to have a problem. What happened in 2016 is that Pokemon would often run hidden powers that would just completely confuse them as to why they would have it on that Pokemon. So the prime example of that is I have Groudon. Groudon is 4 times weak to water. Well, that's fine because its ability blocks all water moves, but there's a problem in that Rayquaza and, even worse, Kyogre exist. And while I might not be able to switch in my Kyogre to set up the rain and attack you in the same turn, if my teammate happens to have a water move, they can use that. Well, that's fine if I'm dealing with Golduck, because Golduck is a water type. Groudon knows that it's going to have a water type move. This much is obvious. But what is less obvious is that Thundurus, the electric flying type, would have a water type move. And so you can see in this clip that as they switch in Kyogre, all of a sudden Thundurus goes for Hidden Power Water. Hidden Power Water is 4 times super effective on Groudon, and it gets one shot. And you say, well, is that really in the spirit of how we want Pokemon to be played? And personally, I don't see any problem with it. This is a strategy that can be employed in the game, and it allows certain Pokemon to have certain roles and niches that otherwise they wouldn't have the ability to perform adequately. However, if Game Freak looks at that and says, that doesn't make any sense, then they may have been ticked and decided to remove it. And I don't necessarily think that that's that's not too far-fetched, right? If we're looking for a reason, a speculation, I think there are 2 main reasons. First of all, we don't want to have to breed forever to get the right kind of IVs. We don't have to worry about having legendaries that come in events but can't get Hidden Power fighting because you gave me 3 guaranteed IVs. We don't want to have to soft reset in front of the legendary until I get a specific Hidden Power. It's really annoying. And then the other one is that when we're actually playing competitive, we don't want random Hidden Powers flying right and left, and we don't know why the heck Pokemon keep dropping like flies, but it's because they have this really weird, obscure Hidden Power. And so those are my 2 reasons I think Game Freak got rid of Hidden Power. And again, like I said, if they wanted Hidden Power back, they would have brought it back in BDSP, which was supposed to be Faithful Remix. Now, Hidden Power seems like a pretty busted move. Any Pokemon, or almost any Pokemon, can learn Hidden Power, and when you do, you can run basically any type of move that you want, with the exception of Fairy, because Hidden Power Fairy didn't exist. And so you can say, I want an Ice move, I want a Psychic move, I want a Fire move, and those are all options available to any Pokemon that can learn Hidden Power. But, on the other hand, Hidden Power is only 60 base power, which is not particularly strong, right? That's on the level of Aerial Ace, right? It's not a very powerful move. Or Silver Wind, I guess, if you want a special one, or Ancient Power. It has no secondary effect, so you don't get any reason to run it other than I needed to have this as an option. If I'm not running it as a move that is the same type as me, which in this generation nobody ever would, because you'll always have some move that's stronger than power available to you, then you're not going to get a same type attack bonus or stab, meaning that it's going to be a very weak 60 base power move. However, it is nice to be able to have access to any type that you want. Now, Z moves in the past broke a lot of moves, right? Heatran's running Z Solar Beam to beat bulky water types that would normally beat it, and Hidden Landorus is running Z Fly so that it has this really strong flying type move, and it turned a lot of moves that were previously really bad on Pokemon into somewhat busted moves, but Hidden Power didn't see that happen, and so I don't think there's ever really been a point where Hidden Power was busted. So I don't think that getting rid of Hidden Power was particularly meant because Hidden Power was just too strong and it was ruining competitive. I think that it was more so just because it was really weird how you had to breed for a specific Hidden Power, and we'd rather just let you have any mon that you played the main game through, mint them up, get them ready for competitive, and not have to worry about that kind of thing. Now, let's talk about why I would use Hidden Power. There are 4 reasons that I will go through why Pokemon would use Hidden Power. The first reason is that I'm going to use Hidden Power to break 4 times weak mons. Examples of that would be Ferrothorn and Scizor. They are weak to fire by 4 times because both Steel and Grass or Bug are weak to fire, and so they're very weak to fire moves. So Hidden Power, even though it's a weak move, will do a lot of damage to these guys, and they also have very good defensive typing otherwise, so it's very strong to have an option to hit them for a lot of Pokemon. Hidden Power Ice is often used for Pokemon such as Landorus or Gliscor, which are ground and flying, or for a lot of Dragon types, because there are Pokemon like Dragonite, which is Dragon and Flying, both 4 times. Those are both weak to Ice, so it's 4 times weak. Garchomp is Dragon and Ground, so is Flygon. Those are both 4 times weak to Ice, and the list goes on from there. Also, Hidden Power Grass is often used for Pokemon like Quagsire or Swampert that are 4 times weak to Grass. In fact, that's their only weakness, so it's very nice to have a Grass move to hit them. The second reason you would use Hidden Power is there are certain Pokemon that have counters or answers to them in the tier, and they need to have some way to hit them. This was especially true back when Pursuit was in the game for Psychic types that would otherwise get trapped by Pursuit. A lot of times you'd have to worry about Pursuit Tyranitar, and so Pokemon like the Latios and Latios would run Hidden Power Fighting to hit Tyranitar, and it would also help to hit Heatran to a lesser extent. Sometimes they would run Hidden Power Ground for Heatran. Hidden Power Fire on Tapu Lele for Scizor and Ferrothorn, and you would also see sometimes Hidden Power Grass in Generation 4, specifically on Heatran. You'd see it later on as well, but in Gen 4, Hidden Power Grass would hit a lot of water types that might be in the tier. That would include things like Swampert, but it could also be used on Starmie or on Suicune. And so most of those Pokemon listed are going to be 4 times weak to Hidden Power because Hidden Power is so weak. And a lot of the best defensive options tend to have 4 times weakness. So you want to have the ability to hit them on that weakness, on that exploitable point. And it also happens that even if they have that exploitable weakness, generally I'm bringing my Pokemon in defensively on something that it normally would be, right? Tyranitar has a 4 times weakness to fighting, but I'm going to bring it in not on a fighting type, I'm going to bring it in on a psychic type because I beat that. I'm going to bring it on Blacephalon, which is Ghost and Fire, and I beat that. But if you give Blacephalon Hidden Power Fighting, all of a sudden now I can turn the tables on Tyranitar, right? And so now that 4 times weakness is exploitable. So there's a lot of overlap between points 1 and 2, but it's just something to consider that both of those points are technically distinct from each other. The third reason to run Hidden Power is that you would use it if you have no better coverage. Now, this is primarily the case for electric Pokemon. Something like Manectric has basically one set that it ever runs, when it's Mega Manectric specifically. You have electric move like Thunderbolt, and a Volt Switch, and then Overheat or Flamethrower, and then Hidden Power. And you either run Hidden Power Ice or you run Hidden Power Grass, depending on what's in the tier. Usually I feel like Hidden Power Ice. And that's just all it ever runs. And why is that? Well, that's because Manectric is actually lucky. It gets a Fire type move, and that's more than a lot of electric types get. A lot of electric types really have no coverage whatsoever. So let's look at the case of something like Jolteon, for instance. Jolteon has quite a few electric moves, but really, if you are an electric type, my opponent can always just bring in a ground type, right? Ground is immune to my electric moves and does super effective damage to me, so it's a double whammy. It's a very safe switch-in if my opponent knows that I have nothing else to hit him with. Jolteon's coverage boils down to Shadow Ball at this point, and I think maybe Hyper Voice, that's about it. And normal and ghost coverage is not good coverage. That's very bad coverage. Ghost Stab is sometimes okay. Normal Stab is usually not fantastic. So you don't really have coverage moves. Jolteon used to have Signal Beam, but Signal Beam was also removed in Gen 8, so Jolteon has no coverage, no way to hit Pokemon super effectively outside of random ghost types getting hit by Shadow Ball. That's really awful, meaning that Jolteon's complete garbage. Now, they gave Pokemon like Raikou, which normally would have had a problem if you got rid of Hidden Power because it used to run Electric Move plus Hidden Power Ice, but they gave it Scald, and it's got Aura Sphere, and it's got all sorts of moves now that it does not miss having Hidden Power whatsoever. So there's no reason you would ever use Jolteon over Raikou. Not that there really was in the first place. Raikou is just generally better, but it's just something to consider. Generally, electric types have very poor coverage, and a lot of times the coverage they have doesn't really help them. For instance, Ampharos has Power Gem, but why would I ever run Power Gem? Because I can hit flying types already with my electric moves, so I don't need it for that. And really what I need something is to help me with ground types, and Power Gem is the opposite of that. It's going to be not very effective against ground types. So it's not a valuable move for Ampharos. Then you look at the rest of its coverage. Is it a grass move? No. Is it an ice move? No. Water move? No. So you don't really have any options for that. The best thing you have after this is Focus Blast, and that's not really going to make the cut. So all these electric types really have major coverage deficiencies, and Hidden Power was their only real way of making progress in a lot of games. So they've been really suffering, and they're not the only ones, but I bring them up as the prime example because it's very obvious that there's a major problem with Hidden Power getting removed for them. So Hidden Power, besides using it for 4 times super effectives, it's used when you have nothing better to use, right? I have no other coverage. Well, toss a Hidden Power on there. It's the best you can do. The last reason is a sort of a deprecated reason, but in generations 2 and 3, Hidden Power was, again, like I said, physical or special, depending on the type you used it for. And in those generations, and especially Generation 2, Pokemon sometimes did not have any better moves to run for their main stab or same type attack bonus, right? If I'm a Scizor in Generation 2, I don't have a good bug move, so I may be forced to run Hidden Power Bug. Hidden Power Bug would have been base 70 in that generation. That's not bad as far as base power goes, and so I will run Hidden Power Bug. That's the best I can do. Right? I don't have access to Mega Horn, for instance, so I'm just going to be stuck with Hidden Power Bug. And in Generation 3, Salamence wants to use Hidden Power Flying because it doesn't want to have to rely on Fly, and hidden power flying is going to be decently powerful. And the reason it stopped using it in Generation 4 is because hidden power flying turned into a special move. And while Salamence sometimes run special sets, at that point I believe it also got Hurricane. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it got Hurricane at that point, and so there's no point in running hidden power now that it had a stronger move that would supersede it in power. So those are the 4 reasons why you would ever use hidden power. And like I said, the last one is deprecated. It doesn't really exist anymore because basically all Pokemon get at least one move that is better than hidden power for it, with the exception of Unown. Now, one question to ask is, okay, well, let's say that we take Generation 8. I want to reintroduce hidden power into it, right? Through some DLC or through some divine intervention. How would Sword and Shield OU change with the introduction of hidden power? Would it make things too broken? Maybe Game Freak saw something that we didn't, and they got rid of it, and it actually helps us. And to that I say no, that's not the case. There are very few Pokemon in current Sword and Shield OU that would benefit from hidden power. Zapdos is definitely at the top of the list for me. Zapdos really likes having hidden power ice so that it can beat Landorus. And of course Landorus can Toxic you or Stone Edge you, but that's the best it can do. And sufficiently bulky Zapdos, because team support can just shrug that off and say, hey, well Lando, you don't have any recovery. We hit you with hidden power ice, it's going to be like a 2-hit KO. So that one's a really useful one. Tapu Lele would still probably run it sometimes. Tapu Lele does struggle with more 4-move slot syndrome, meaning that oftentimes Tapu Lele is stuck trying to decide which move it wants to run. And it runs a Psychic move, sometimes it wants to run Psyshock and Psychic. It runs Moonblast always, and then it usually wants to run Focus Blast. So it's going to have to give up a Psychic move at the very least in order to run a Hidden Power Fire or Ferrothorn, and then maybe Scizor, but Scizor isn't even in the LU tier and is almost never seen. So mostly just Ferrothorn. And I guess Magnezone, I don't know. But then it wants to run Thunder or Thunderbolt for Corviknight a lot of times. So I don't even think that Tapu Lele would run Hidden Power Fire in this particular generation, right? In the previous generation, you had Ferrothorn and Mega Scizor. Without the Mega, you don't see Scizor in OU very much. And Ferrothorn is annoying, but you hit 1 or 2 Focus Blasts, and all of a sudden that's a lot less annoying. Or you just have something like Magnezone on your team to trap it, and you can deal with it in that fashion. So I don't really think Lele necessarily needs it. Magnezone could run Hidden Power Fire, and it would help its choice spec set, but they also gave Magnezone Body Press in exchange, and it's still been using that to trap everything it needs to trap. So Magnezone's role hasn't changed. And some might argue that it actually could even aid Magnezone to have Body Press over Hidden Power Fire, especially against the Rain matchup, because Hidden Power Fire is much weaker in Rain, but Body Press is just going to still beat Ferrothorn reliably no matter what the weather conditions happen to be. So I think that overall, having Hidden Power wouldn't change too much in the OU metagame. I'm sure there are a couple mons in lower tiers that might be able to break up into OU if they have the opportunity to have Hidden Power. But at that point, that's really way too much into the Theorymon realm, and I don't feel confident in making any assertions as to which Pokemon would suddenly become much better in OU that aren't currently there. So I'm just going to leave that aside. One thing I do know is that if you put in Hidden Power, the lower tiers would become a bit shooken up, right? For instance, Xurkitree in the RU tier would probably get banned, in my opinion. Give it Hidden Power Ice, and all of a sudden it can hit things like Noivern and Flygon really easily. It can hit a lot of other ground types as it needs to. Or it could even run maybe like, Hidden Power Bug for Celebi, whatever cheeky option it needs to have to break the metagame. And Xurkitree is already so strong, I think that might be enough. And there might be a few others that you could look through the tiers and figure out that, oh, well, this would be too strong, right? Oh, well, this gets Hidden Power Fire now. Okay, well, that'll need to go. But OU, I think, is more or less fixed. And one of the reasons for that is that the mons that are in OU are already high-value mons, right? They are ones that don't necessarily need coverage options in order to be good. They already stand on their own merits, and they already have enough good options, enough good moves that they don't need some weak 60 power base move in order to make their kit work. So I don't really see that changing too much. Now, BDSP is somewhat of a dead metagame, but I do want to discuss it briefly because BDSP is a very limited metagame, and that limited metagame, we can observe how Hidden Power would change that. BDSP would drastically change if you had Hidden Power in the metagame because there are a lot of Pokemon in there that are currently used that are metagame centralizing, meaning that you see them on the majority of teams to the point where you can just count on them being there. This includes Pokemon like Gliscor and Scizor, and there's a common conception that if you have fire and ice coverage, that you can be good in OU. Because I have an ice move for Gliscor, I have a fire move for Scizor, and now I can break the most common defensive core in OU. And if I had options for Hidden Power to that extent, then a lot of special attackers that are currently running rampant in the tier might be too much for it. Now, Latios was banned in BDSP because it was already too strong. What about Latios? If you give Latios Hidden Power Fire, all of a sudden it can break over Scizor, so Latios might even get banned. Something like Rotom or Alakazam might also be a major problem, especially Alakazam, I would think. Magnezone would also be a little bit annoying. There are a lot of Pokemon that are special attackers in the tier, and they would be able to break through Gliscor or Scizor or whatever they needed to win the game, and only Blissey would not really care about this Hidden Power addition. So you would have to ban a lot of the stronger special attackers, and I actually think that would make the metagame trend more towards physical attackers as physical attackers become more optimal to run. If you consider, for instance, Scizor often has a special defensive set, but if I know that a lot of Pokemon now have Hidden Power Fire, well, what does it behoove me to run a special defensive set when I know Hidden Power Fire is still going to blow me back? I'll see a lot more offensive-based Scizors as a result. If I see a lot more offensive-based Scizors, maybe I need to have more physically defensive Pokemon. And if a lot of the best special attackers have been banned, similarly, then I'm going to not see as many special attackers because most of them got banned. And therefore, I'm going to see a lot more physical walls and a lot more physical attackers as a result. That's my personal opinion, though. I think, though, that Hidden Power would have drastically shaped BDSP in a way that's far different from what we currently see. However, that being said, good mons are still good mons. I just think that the way that those mons are used would have changed, and I think that certain mons would have to get banned in order to keep the metagame as a whole balanced. So, Hidden Power isn't necessarily a move without danger, because it can be dangerous. But in a metagame with a wide variety of Pokemon and suitable answers for most of them, if not all of them, then Hidden Power has a fine place and it doesn't really affect things overall. Alright, with that out of the way, I want to finally talk about what are the options moving forward. Well, we have a few options. Option 1 is that I'm wrong, and that Hidden Power will come back in Generation 9. Now, this is a possibility. I still don't think it's going to happen, because, as I mentioned before, if they wanted it back, they would have brought it back with BDSP. I think there's a philosophical reason that the Game Freak wants Hidden Power gone. I think they think that maybe they made a mistake of some sort in introducing it in the first place, and that it's making the metagame too difficult to check Pokemon because they can always have some extra crazy zany coverage move that will beat certain Pokemon that were normally supposed to be bulky. The second option is that, similar to Generation 8, Hidden Power doesn't come back at all. Of course, this will necessitate the Unown cannot be played in the game, but that's fine, nobody really cares about Unown. The third option is that Hidden Power comes back like it did in BDSP, meaning that only Unown can learn it. And this is, fair enough. That would be basically the same as option 2, only that we have Unown now. Right? That's the only difference. Option 4 is the Legends Arceus Hidden Power. And we haven't talked about Legends Arceus until now, but Hidden Power was in Legends Arceus because it was on Unown. And Hidden Power could come back like that, but we only allow Unown to learn it. So still, Hidden Power is only on Unown, but it has a different mechanic, and we'll talk more about that mechanic here in a second. The final option is that Hidden Power comes back like it did in Legends Arceus, but almost all the Mons can learn it. Just, the same Mons that could learn Hidden Power before, they can learn it now. But now Hidden Power operates like it did in Legends Arceus. And if that happens, I believe Smogon will ban it. And so let's talk about what likelihood I think each of these possibilities will have. The possibility of me being wrong and Hidden Power comes back in Gen 9 and we act like nothing ever happened, I think that's about 20%. I give it a decent shot of happening. However, I really don't think it will, just because I think Game Freak has it out for Hidden Power. The chance that Hidden Power doesn't come back at all, because we don't get Unown back, I'd say is about 15%. If Hidden Power comes back on just Unown, I would say that's about 50%. That's a very likely possibility, because Unown coming back is, decent. It's a decent possibility. You maybe want to have 500 or 600 Pokemon in the decks. Unown being one of them is not too big of a deal, and you can just sort of toss it in there. Make a fun little region where you catch all the Unown, make a little mini game out of it, or whatever you want to do, sort of like they did in Legends Arceus. And if you do that, and you only give Hidden Power to Unown, then, that's easy enough to deal with, because then you don't have to worry about it on any other Pokemon, but you still get your Unown. And so I give that about a 50% chance of happening. I think that's the most likely possibility. The fourth possibility is where we have Unown come back, but Hidden Power operates like it did in Legends Arceus. I think that maybe is a 10% possibility. If they want to fundamentally change how Hidden Power operates, then that's their prerogative. But if they do that, I think they will limit it to Unown. I don't really see that happening, but it may. And then the final option is that they bring it back with the changed mechanics, but they give it back to everybody. And I really don't see that happening, so I give that a 5% chance of happening, right? A very slim chance to see all the Pokemon get Legends Arceus version of Hidden Power. So let's talk about Legends Arceus for a second. What does Hidden Power do in Legends Arceus? Legends Arceus has an entirely different battle mechanics system compared to the mainline games, and many of the moves were tweaked for the game. For instance, moves like Close Combat, which were very strong previously, got their base power nerfed in Legends Arceus. And in fact, most Pokemon's moves got nerfed when they moved over to Legends Arceus. They were trying to make the strongest moves less powerful to balance the alpha Pokemon and to balance late game versus mid game, and make sure that the very strong Pokemon don't completely destroy you, and make sure that when you get to having level 100 Pokemon, that you don't destroy wild Pokemon right and left. So they did this balancing act. However, I don't think that they will maintain the base power difference when they go back to the main games. And so Hidden Power in Legends Arceus was a base power of 50, whereas it's usually 60, right? And I think that's in line with most of the other stat drops for moves. So if Hidden Power comes back to the main games and it's acting like it is in Legends Arceus, I think it'll still go back to its normal base power of 60. So let's plan on that contingency specifically. Now, in Legends Arceus, Hidden Power will attack a Pokemon with the type that is most super effective against it and happens to also give you the best defensive typing. And this is exactly the same way that Arceus's Judgment operates in Legends Arceus. So they gave Arceus a boosted plate that it could hold, and it would make it so that it would always use a Judgment that would hit super effective and would change Arceus's type to that type, so it always got the same type attack bonus on this Judgment, which is an extremely busted move and a mechanic. However, it's the god of Pokemon, so you expect that he can have busted moves, right? That's not the end of the world. Now, maybe it's the end of the world for the Uber's tier, but I'm not worried about the Uber's tier and what Arceus will do to that. I'm worried about Hidden Power. Hidden Power, though, basically mirrors that, and on Unown, because Unown does not change its type, it will only get a same type attack bonus, meaning a 50% increase to damage done using the move if it happens to be Hidden Power Psychic, which, is fair enough, but it actually does allow Unown to hit every single Pokemon it fights super effectively, which is really nice. The other thing I should mention, though, is that what this allows us to do is not have a hidden power based off of your IVs. So if Game Freak had a problem with the IV system specifically, and that was why they got rid of hidden power, then this would be a way to circumvent that. I can have hidden power on my Pokemon, but that hidden power will change depending on the Pokemon I'm fighting, and is not necessarily tied to the Pokemon itself, meaning I no longer have to breed for hidden power. I fixed the problem. Give me a raise, right? That may be what they were thinking. And that's fine if that's what they were thinking. However, I don't really think that's good if you extend it beyond Unown. Now, Unown is a very weak Pokemon. Even if it hits you super effectively, that's only if it outspeeds you with its pitiful speed stat, and that's only if it does enough damage to you with its pitiful special attack stat, and then you can just kill it. It's not a threat in whatever whatsoever. And it only has that one move, so granting it the ability to hit Pokemon isn't the end of the world. But if you give this move to other Pokemon and allow it to keep the same mechanics, well, all of a sudden, we've got an entirely different can of worms to open here. So, we have all our options now. We have to decide which one to bet that is going to happen, right? We have option 1 where it doesn't come back, or it comes back just like it was before. We know what that looks like. We're not worried about that. Option 2 where it doesn't come back at all. We know what that looks like. It looks like Sword and Shield. Option 3 where only Unown learns it is basically the same as option 2 because Unown is entirely irrelevant. So it's basically option 2. And option 4 is still like option 2 because again, Unown is irrelevant. And even if Unown has this busted Legends Arceus version of hidden power, it's not going to affect the metagame. Maybe it'll affect Zeo, right? The lowest possible tier, because then Unown might be able to do something there, and that would be a first. But that's about as far as that'll go. So the only thing left to discuss is what happens in the unlikely case where hidden powers mechanics are changed to reflect the mechanics of Legends Arceus, but everybody gets to learn it. What kind of havoc will that wreak, and why do I claim that Smogon would ban it? Okay, so there's a few things that we don't know about it, and I have to make this caveat. We don't know how this hidden power would affect abilities. Now, in Legends Arceus, we don't have abilities, so we don't have to worry about that, but it also means we don't have that kind of information. For example, Dry Skin is an ability that allows a Pokemon to absorb water-type moves, and they become immune to them. Where Flash Fire allows Amon to be immune to fire-type moves. Now, generally, I feel like Pokemon who have these abilities aren't going to be weak to those types necessarily, although there might be 1 or 2 that I'm not thinking of. But Heatran's not actually weak to fire. Heliolisk is not weak to water, neither is Toxicroak. So you have to find a Pokemon who naturally got that ability who was weak to that type. There might be 1 or 2 that I'm not thinking of. But you can always hack Pokemon and you can give Scizor Flash Fire. If I were an Unown and I used Hidden Power on a Flash Fire Scizor, will I get Hidden Power Fire? In which case, is not caring at all about the ability, and now I've actually powered it up, which is not what I want. right? So that would actually be really bad for hidden power, because then you would never want to click it, especially in balanced attack mons or something. But that would be something to consider. We don't know how that'll operate. Another example of an ability that could throw a wrench in the entire system is Zoroark. Now, Zoroark does exist in Legends Arceus, but the difference there is that Zoroark is not disguising itself as another Pokemon, because the ability does not exist. But when abilities return and Zoroark can disguise itself, if hidden power targets Zoroark, then that will give away Zoroark's position. Arguably, that's not that big of a deal, because once you hit Zoroark, his disguise is busted anyway, and you know that it's Zoroark. So that's not that. Alright, it's illusion, not disguise. It's an illusion. Its illusion goes away, and you know that it's Zoroark. So having the hidden power affected accordingly isn't that big of a deal. But what is a big of a deal is the fact that if I know that you have a Zoroark on your team, I'll be more likely to click hidden power, because if I know that it hits Zoroark super effectively, maybe like hidden power fighting probably, then I will just click that move. And I don't have to think, oh, is this a Zoroark? Which is half the reason to run Zoroark, is to play mind games with the opponent. And that would actually nerf the Zoroark as a result, because now my opponent doesn't have to think about it. They can just throw out whatever move and hit me super effectively. Alternatively, hidden power could hit the Pokemon at face value, in which case I would be less likely to click hidden power in front of a Zoroark team, because there's a possibility I'll get nothing out of it as a result. Right? I'm hitting a Toxicroak with hidden power. The hidden power says hidden power psychic, and then it does nothing because it was a Zoroark. Right, that's a very easy example of what that would look like. So we don't know how that's going to operate. So we have to put that aside for now and talk about things that we do know. So one thing that we should consider is Ditto. Now, Ditto is a very scary mon. In previous generations, Ditto would have to specifically IV itself to have a certain hidden power when it transformed, and that would be tier dependent and matchup dependent, depending on what you're worried about. Because if you copied a hidden power Pokemon and you hadn't specifically set your IVs beforehand, then you'd get hidden power dark, and hidden power dark is just basically never useful. And so it would be much better if you gave your Ditto hidden power ice IVs or hidden power fire IVs, such that when you go into battle and you get hidden power, you have that ability. But what happens if we have Legends Arceus hidden power and Ditto is in the game? Ditto comes in, copies a Pokemon with hidden power. Now I can use hidden power and just sweep through your entire team, because it doesn't matter what you have out in front or what one you go into, I'm just going to click hidden power. And this Ditto doesn't have to lock itself into anything better. Now, to be fair, it's only a base 60 power move. But what do we know about Ditto? Ditto's at its strongest when it's copying a setup sweeper. So if I copy something that has a +4 nasty plot and it happens to have hidden power, well, now I'm hitting +4 hidden powers on everything at +1 speed, and all of a sudden you may not have an answer for that anymore. That's really dangerous. So that seems a little bit busted to me. Now, another big problem is that hidden power is going to be a safe play in singles, generally speaking, if it always changes type to be super effective like it does in Legends Arceus. You don't need to make a prediction. If I have a Heatran out and I might want to switch into my Landorus, if I am going, like for instance, if I was Tapu Lele with hidden power, if I have hidden power against Landorus, and it's a normal hidden power, if it's hidden power ground, well, I could hit the Heatran, but if my opponent switches into Landorus, then it will be immune to hidden power ground. That's a problem, and I have to predict that. If I had hidden power fighting for Tyranitar, and Landorus came in, then that would resist the hidden power fighting. But if I have Legends Arceus version of hidden power, I can just click hidden power. And it doesn't matter what you go into, it will always hit you super effectively. So Choice Specs Tapu Lele can just click a button, and it doesn't have to think about it anymore at all. Right? I'm going to hit the Heatran with hidden power ground, Lando with hidden power ice, the Seismitoad with hidden power grass, whatever it needs to be. And so all these Pokemon that previously only had to worry about specific threats hitting them with hidden power now just have to worry about always coming in on a super effective hidden power, which is not good thing to be concerned with, I think. Now, another one that's funny is that even though Hidden Power being a weak base 50 or 60 power move, maybe they keep it nerfed at 50 base power just to try to keep Hidden Power weaker. Even if I don't need it, it might still be more consistent. For instance, Latios, they have the ability to run all sorts of moves like Mystical Fire or Aura Sphere that they don't need to run Hidden Power. But what if I run a Stored Power Latios? Stored Power, Calm Mind, Recover / Roost, Weakness Policy, and then my last move. What is my last move? Well, I could run Aura Sphere for Dark types, so I don't have to worry about Stored Power. That would be a good option. I could run all sorts of other moves in the last slot, or I could run Hidden Power. Even if Hidden Power is weaker than a lot of my other options, that would mean that at +2, +3 special attack, power is still pretty strong at that point, and it's always hitting my opponent for super effective. If it's against Pokemon that has 4 times weakness, well, bam, now it's an extremely powerful move all of a sudden, and I can just click it. I don't have to think about it at all, and it'll be a very consistent option. Legends Arceus also allows Hidden Power Fairy to be a thing. Previously, Hidden Power was calculated to your IVs using a system developed in earlier generations, Gen 3 specifically, and then in Gen 4 the physical special split happened, and that's fine. And then in Generation 6 it was solidified to be base 60 power, but which hidden power you had access to was determined in Generation 3. So the hidden power you had, that's locked in. And because they made that system before the Fairy type exists, Fairy type hidden power never existed. But in Legends Arceus, because it was completely made up and always just hit your opponent super effectively, now Hidden Power Fairy can exist, right? If I hit Hydreigon with Hidden Power, now Hidden Power Fairy will come out with the Legends Arceus system. So if they want to keep this option of having Hidden Power Fairy, because they think, oh, it's cool, now we have Hidden Power Fairy, then they only have 2 options. One, if they want to make it more like Hidden Power used to be, and not have it hit every Pokemon super effectively like it does in Legends Arceus, then they're going to have to rework the entire IV system, which means that a lot of Pokemon that you have in your Pokemon home that previously had Hidden Power Fire, all of a sudden that's been messed up, and now they have Hidden Power Bug, and that doesn't do anything for you. Or something like that, right? And that wouldn't be really a good option. Or they have to keep the Legends Arceus system. So if they want to keep Hidden Power Fairy, either 1, they have to mess up the IV system, or 2, they will have to keep the Legends Arceus system. And the Legends Arceus system, as we've seen, is quite busted. And of course, Hidden Power Fairy is also pretty busted because, nobody is immune to Fairy type, and it's really good typing to have, or as a move generally. It hits so many things super effectively. So Hidden Power Fairy is a really nice thing to have. So even if they weren't to do the Legends Arceus version, that's just something to note. Now, even if they put in Frostbite over Freeze, which is one final little wrinkle in this, if they took Frostbite, put that into the game along with Hidden Power, that would be a nerf to special attackers, because a lot of special attackers would lose 50% of their special attack from Frostbite, similar to how Burn affects physical attackers. However, even with that nerf to special attackers, I think that Hidden Power, acting like it does in Legends Arceus, would be far too powerful, and would overrun the metagame with just mindless Hidden Power clicking, to the point where Smogon would just ban it. So, because it's so low risk, I don't have to predict my opponent, I can get off damage no matter what by the end of the turn. I don't really feel like it would be a good thing for competitive. So I don't really see Game Freak doing that, because even though they make a lot of stupid decisions, I don't think they'd be that stupid to put something in that would completely alter VGC. So I don't see the Legends Arceus version of Hidden Power coming to all Pokemon. So although I do think Game Freak always reserves the right to bring back Hidden Power, as it was before, and just forego having Hidden Power Fairy, and making it so that people still have to breed specific IVs on Pokemon to get specific Hidden Powers. I don't think that they want to do that. I think they want to avoid having that problem for breeding and for having a random Thundurus is killing Groudons. And so I really don't see Hidden Power coming back at all. Or if it does, I think only Unown will be able to learn it in the future. Anyway, that was a very long, very rambly video, but this is something that I think bears discussing as we enter a new generation, right? In this generation, we had a lot of moves that were lost, like Pursuit, Hidden Power, Signal Beam. Those are just a few, and it would be nice to see a lot of them return in Generation 9, and Hidden Power is one of the ones that's most influential, so it's very important to consider how that would change the metagame if it were back. But I don't think it will come back. Anyway, you guys probably have your own opinions on this. If you made it to the end of this video, leave them in the comments so that we can discuss them down there, and I'll see you next time.